it's time for my review of the Star Trek Picard finale, in Arcadia Ego Part 2. I've been putting it off a little bit. As I record this is Saturday, and the episode came out on Thursday, which is when I watched it for the first time, so I've been putting it off, and I think it's because, as Picard said way back in the first episode, I don't want the game to end. But that's a little silly. I plan to do another video of an overview of the season, that should be in about a week or two. I want to rewatch all 10 episodes before that video, so it won't be all that soon. But anyway, let's get right into it. Oh, I drew a little sad face, not because the episode was bad at all, but because I was sad that it was the last episode. In fact, I think this episode was very strong. Very strong. I admit I was a little worried. The show had a lot of balls in the air. I didn't think it would address everything. And there are a few things that went unaddressed, but I'll talk about that. But this episode was very strong. Went much better, in fact, not much better. This makes me sound like I was expecting it to be bad. I wasn't. I think this season has been very good, but the show was better than I expected. And so I took a lot of notes. I think I took more notes on this episode than any previous one. We start off with Narek. I literally wrote his name, Narek, which is how I think of him now, because, Narek. Anyway, he's sneaking onto the Borg cube. The establishing shot of the Borg cube, which is in water now, apparently. That's okay. But I thought that shot was just lovely. I don't really talk about the visual elements of this show a lot, but it was beautiful. Aesthetically, the show is really beautiful. When he sneaks in, he sneaks past Seven and Elnor having a conversation. Elnor, with no malice at all, wonders if the Borg, the XBs, if their lives are worth living, because they're so hated and so seemingly miserable. And Seven is like, well, is my life worth living? I have no home. I'm an XB. And Elnor says, I miss you. Elnor is very genuine, following the way of absolute candor. There's no pretense to him at all, which is very refreshing. Anyway, Narek meets up with Narissa. And yeah, in the very last episode, I'm going to call her Narissa. I've been calling her Rizzo, but I think Narissa is her actual name. They have a conversation that, honestly, I don't care about. Basically, this is a plot point. Narek finds some grenades, and Narissa says she's gonna try to power up the cube's weapons. I'm a little surprised that she's on the cube, because last we saw she was being attacked by the XBs, and she had apparently beamed away. I guess there's no reason she couldn't have beamed elsewhere on the cube, but the implication to me was that she had beamed off the cube onto one of the Romulan warbirds, but that's okay. I guess this is the only way for them to interact. Anyway, Narek leaves, and Elnor follows. And then we go to Picard. I believe we go to Picard under house arrest in the settlement in Coppelius, with the little butterfly that goes from blue to orange. And that butterfly is symbolic of, throughout the episode, of life, maybe even of freedom. Anyway, it flies away, and Soji comes in, and they have a conversation. And the conversations between Picard and Soji really are the heart of this episode, get into the moral discussions. Picard has a lot of great things to say. Here he says, to say you have no choice is a failure of imagination. Because Soji believes she has no choice, that the organics have given her and the rest of the synths no choice but to call on these uber synths to come save them by destroying organic life. And Picard, Soji has a point that the synths have been persecuted by the Romulans and by the Federation too, with the ban. But Picard doesn't let her off the hook. He tells her, you have a choice. To say you have no choice, the failure of imagination. That in itself is a choice. So that's really good. What else? Let's see. All right. We check in with Agnes. I missed the first time around, or at least I didn't notice, and I'd forgotten the significance of when Soji goes into Picard's room, which is locked, of course. She uses a retina scanner to get in, and Agnes observes this. And the first time around, as I said, I either didn't get the significance, or by the time I realized why that would have been significant, I'd forgotten that little bit. But anyway, it turns out that Agnes is a double agent again, only this time for our heroes, for the good guys. I didn't see that coming. Maybe I should have. I thought Alton Soon had successfully manipulated her into being fully on the synth side, but we find out that she's not. So I thought that was a little symmetry, a little bit of paralleling, that Agnes is making her own choices, is not being manipulated or pushed around to follow other people's agendas. Oh, and then we go to the La Serena. And here's a funny little bit. The establishing shot of La Serena in the kind of the little deserty area. When I first saw it, I said, hey, it looks kind of like the Razorback from The Expanse. And I'm not a person who really pays attention to ships or ship design, so that was an odd thought for me to have, but there it was. They're not identical, obviously, and I believe the La Serena must be much bigger, but I think it's because they're both red, pointy. That's Sam. But yeah, just thought I'd mention that because a weird little thought I had. Anyway, Raffi and Rios are trying to repair it with the little tool that Arcana gave Raffi last episode, saying use your imagination. And basically, it's like a magic wand. It does what Agnes later on in the episode will use some technobabble about it that I didn't really catch, but it's a magic wand. It does whatever necessary for the plot. And I don't mind. I think this episode was strong enough that this didn't bother me. But it is a little weakness in the storytelling. So just point that out and move on. The really cool part of this scene, of course, is Raffi and Rios, who play off each other very well. That friendship feels very genuine, very lived in. You believe these two people have known each other for years. And Narek shows up throwing rocks. And Raffi refers to him as the abusive Romulan boyfriend, which I was really glad to hear. I'm glad the show is not whitewashing what Narek did to Soji or his behavior. I've been afraid this whole time that he's they're going to try for some redemption arc that I just was not going to buy into and would probably find even a little bit offensive. So that didn't happen. I'm glad. I wrote, Narek is smug and irritating. Right. Anyway, later that night, Eleanor shows up too, as Narek is talking about filling in Ruffy and Rios on the Uber synth situation and how everyone is doomed unless they stop the synths from building this beacon. Eleanor shows up, and puts her sword to Narek and says his Romulan phrase. I don't think we got subtitles, I didn't notice them. And Narek says, I choose to live, I very much choose to live, which was, okay, a little bit funny. And later on, the four of them were outside around a campfire. I guess they needed campfire for this, because Narek tells a scary story about the legend of the two sisters, demon sisters, who bring forth even worse demons, and it's basically the end of the world. They call it Gamadan. Rio says it's like a Judgment Day or Ragnarok. Anyway, I guess it's pretty okay to have Narek playing off other actors instead of Soji or Narissa, but honestly, this is exposition. It's not really, I guess the story is a little bit more poetic, but it's not really anything we haven't known or guessed at before. The point is, it's ominous. And then we see O, no longer Commodore O, General O, in one of the Romulan flagship, I assume, on their way to destroy the synth planet. It's an odd little thing. The closed captioning on my TV had O's name as Nedar, Nedar, and I don't think that name was ever spoken. So I don't know if that's supposed to be her actual Romulan name and O is an alias, or if that's just a weird mistake they made. I don't know. I thought Hi, Sam. Why don't you lay down? Anyway, I thought that was a weird little thing I thought I'd mention. And then it's the next morning, and Agnes is taken she tricked Soong out of the room, Brett Spiner's character, out of the room, and took poor Asaga's eye, the one that wasn't poked through. What is this show in eyes? I mean, I know why shows do that. It's very viscerally horrifying to pluck someone's eye out. You see that eye violence a lot in different movies and television, but yeah. And I don't object to violence in Star Trek. I'm not saying, oh, think of the children. I don't know that it's more violent or excessively more violent than it ever has been, but I just am squeamish. I don't like to see eye things. Anyway, she takes the eye, uses it on the retina scanner, and breaks Picard out. And so that's exciting. We're starting to get into more of the action-y part. Those two go to the La Sirena. The La Sirena crew plus Narek have gone to the settlement. They didn't pass each other along the way, I guess. They've gone to the settlement to stop the beacon. We get a little bit of that heist vibe that was in Stardust City Rag with this time, before it was Raffi, this time it's Narek describing the plan, and then we intercut with the four of them executing the plan. And anyway, And that gets a little actiony. And then you have, let's talk about this first. The raid it doesn't come off, doesn't succeed, as unsurprisingly, because there's still more of the episode, lots more episode to go. And Eric is captured by the Sins. They're stopped. Soji grabs the grenade and throws it way up into the sky. Anyway, it fails, and Eric is captured, and he's crying out to Soji, and you just shut up, dude. No one wants to hear from you. And this was funny little thing. They drag him off, and that's the last we see of Narek for the entire episode. And I didn't even notice until it was over, and I was thinking about things. I was like, wow, that's the last we saw of Narek. And that's kind of a loose thread. Kind of something that maybe should have been addressed later on from a writing point of view, but honestly, I am so disengaged from that character. Like I said, I didn't notice, didn't really care. Presumably, who knows what happened to him? Maybe he's in prison on Capellius or some other Federation world. Maybe he was extradited back to Romulus. Who knows? Who cares? Narek is the worst. Anyway, Dr. Soong, and I'm so glad I was right about this. Dr. Soong is not a bad guy. He's not secretly evil. I was suspicious. Maybe it's not accurate to say I was right about this. This is something I hoped would happen. I thought he was suspicious last episode, and I said I hope there wasn't a twist, that it didn't turn out he'd be evil or be Lore in disguise or anything like that. I just kind of wanted him to be who he appeared to be, and he is. Last episode, I thought he was manipulative with Agnes, and I still kind of think so, but I also think he was sincere. He didn't have a secret agenda. He wanted her expertise to do his mind transfer thing with his golem. And maybe he was manipulative in that he saw which buttons to push to get her to do that, but like I said, no secret agenda. He was sincere. He's not secretly evil. The thing is, he's been downloading Saga's memories for her sister as a keepsake for her sister, and this is how he finds out that it was Narek and Sudra that killed Saga, and he's horrified by this. He genuinely loves the Synths. He doesn't consider them disposable or anything. He refers to them as his children, and he seems to generally feel this way. He's heartbroken by what he sees here, and it causes him to go to Sudra after the wild La Serena raid. La Serena crew, Rafi and Rios and Elnor and Narek have come and are trying to stop the beacon. He comes, he decides to help them. He deactivates Sudra. And who knows, maybe she's in a drawer like before now. But Sudra did not play as big a part in this episode as I was expecting from last week. That's not a criticism, it's just an observation. And I kind of hope we get more of her next season, because I really like her. She's villainous. The things she does are wrong. I mean, she killed her sister. But her motives are much more understandable, much more relatable than, say, Narek's or Narissa's or O's. So I really liked her as a short-term villain. But I understand why this isn't about her. This is about Soji and her choice. So I think that's the right call. Anyway, let's see. Anyway, alright. Picard and Agnes have got to the La Serena. Like I said, I guess they didn't cross paths with the other four coming back along the way. And Picard has more wise things to say. He says fear is an incompetent teacher. And that's quite a profound thing to say. I think a lot of the bad things that have happened in this season, or in the backstory to the season, because of fear from various people. The synths are afraid now, which is why they're calling on building this beacon called the Uber synths. The Romulans have been afraid. That's why they want to destroy the synths. Everyone's afraid of the 4XBs. The Federation was afraid after the attack on Mars, which caused them to ban synthetics and stop helping Romulus. Fear is a dangerous thing, and Picard recognizes this, and he wants to show the Soji and the rest of the synths by example that they don't need to be afraid. And so they take off in the La Sirena. Agnes says, "Make it so." I thought that was fun. So they take off. Picard has kind of a rough time piloting. It leads to a little bit of a funny moment. Those two are really funny together. I guess Emmett and the rest of the holograms are offline. The magic wand thing didn't bring them back up, because otherwise you could have the actual navigator, holographic navigator, flying the ship. But anyway, they get up into space, and the magic wand is still there, so they are able to pull off the Picard maneuver part 2, make La Sirena look as if there are like 100 La Sirenas, which confuses the Romulans, hopefully long enough for Starfleet to show up. And also, there's another piece of action going on the Borg cube. Seven has found Narissa, who is powering up the weapons to presumably kill the synths, attack the settlement possibly, who knows. And they fight, and it's a good fight. We get to see these two and their stunt doubles, I assume, show off their fighting moves, just like we did with Narek in the settlement. And eventually, Narissa taunts Seven. She says some things. I don't know how she knows them. She calls her poor Queen Annika, who was assimilated at 6 years old. How does she know that? The best idea I could come up with is that Rhonda told her. Rhonda was once part of the collective. I think I guess they gave her that dialogue so she could do some villainous taunting. But anyway, Seven knocks her off the ledge and down into this bottomless chasm. So she's dead. Hopefully. And frankly, Seven says, "This is for Hugh," and I'm all for that. I said yes, because justice for Hugh. I'm not generally pro murder. I don't think of this as murder, actually. This was self-defense. Narissa was doing something very bad that was going to kill lots of people. Seven stopped her. Narissa would clearly have killed Seven if she had the chance. Seven was defending herself and other people. I don't consider this murder, but I think Seven does. She talks later on in a scene we'll get to. We'll talk about in a little bit. So anyway, this was a good fight scene. But like a lot of the Borg Cube storylines throughout the season, it feels a little like undercooked, you know? Like it was very affecting for Seven to say this is for Hugh, but it would have been more so if we'd ever seen Seven and Hugh interact on screen, because it's believable that those two would know each other, would have a friendship, a relationship, would know each other. And Jerry Ryan sells it very well, but the fact that we've never saw those two characters interact on screen, it blunts the impact a little bit. So that's kind of a problem. So anyway, that's going on. I kind of a lot of the Borg Cube storyline feels like, anyway, this also happened, which is kind of a season-long problem, which I should talk about in the overview video that I'm going to do. Anyway, La Serena takes a hit and goes tumbling. They're okay, but they go tumbling. Soji, who has been observing this on the holographic screen where she's building her beacon, is horrified. She's shocked. She cares about Picard clearly and doesn't want him hurt. She's clearly very torn. Here we go. Okay. Picard talks to Soji on an open channel. Sam, hush. Hi. Tells her that he intends to sacrifice. And here's the Picard speech that helps save the day. Tells her that he's willing to sacrifice himself for her, that he believes in her, knows she'll make the right choice. He's kind of the embodiment of what Starfleet and the Federation stand for here. We believe in you. We believe in your better nature. We believe you can make the right choice for yourself. It's really very touching. Sam. I could shut him outside, but he just made noise out there. Anyway. I'm getting distracted. The Starfleet shows up. While I'm getting the timeline confused. Starfleet shows up before Picard makes this speech, I believe. A Starfleet, the task force, with the Zheng He, there's a flagship, with Riker in command, which is just awesome. I was so delighted to see him in the uniform, sitting in the command chair, kind of smirking at O, totally confident, totally in charge, telling O that Coppelius is a Federation protectorate now, and the Romulans, they need to step off. And O says, nope, we're gonna fight. And then the big Picard speech that he gives to Soji happens. It was very affecting. It seemed to affect O even, because Soji, it works. Soji shuts down the beacon, not before it activates and it opens a portal to some, I don't know, other dimension. I don't know where this is supposed to be. Hammer space, who knows? Another dimension. And you see the creepy mechanical-like tentacles coming out. I guess those are the Ubersons. But Soji then shuts it down. And I guess they say, I don't know, wrong number. Someone but dialed us. We'll go back to what we were doing. And it's kind of funny. I'm making fun of it a little bit, but that's okay. I'm okay with this. Because it's not about them. They're the big looming threat, but they're not really what needs to be defeated. It's the fear and the distrust and the wanting to lash out. That's the enemy. And that Soji has defeated that within herself by validating trust and hope and all those good things that Starfleet stands for. Starfleet and Star Trek and Federation. So they turn it. So she shuts it down. Picard and Riker have a lovely, lovely conversation about Picard thinks Will for always having his back, and Will says, well, anytime. And it was just lovely, and they sign off. And Picard says very quietly, I do. Because he's dying. Will knows this. I'm pretty sure because Deanna knew it. But doesn't, I assume, know it's happening right now. Because Picard had Agnes give him something, some kind of stimulant or something, so he could talk to Soji and keep going, but it's going to accelerate his death. And anyway, he's dying right now. And Soji is panicked and beams them both down, Agnes and Picard, to the settlement where Picard dies. He dies, surrounded by his friends, kind of his family, a found family, even if they are decidedly motley. He dies with Raffi. The last thing he says is to tell Raffi she was right, which I really liked because he's been, throughout the season, he's been just a little bit dismissive of her, doesn't want to hear her if she's saying something that is what he doesn't want to hear. Repeating myself. If she's contradicting him or telling him something he'd prefer not to be true, then he kind of dismissive. So him saying, you were quite right, even if he doesn't specify for what, I thought that was really a very lovely, graceful little note. Anyway, Picard dies, and here we get into probably what most people will remember from this episode. He goes into massively complicated quantum simulation where he meets Data, and it's really Data. The technical explanation is that Data's consciousness was reconstituted from that neuron that Bruce Maddox was able to take from B4, and he's been in this module that Alton Soong has for all this time, and Picard's consciousness is in there too, because Soji and Soong and Girardi were able to scan it and basically scan his entire brain and put it in here with Data. But anyway, that's technical stuff that doesn't actually matter. The point is, Picard and Data sit down in the study, simulated study, and have a conversation. A really beautiful, lovely conversation. And I don't want to just rehash the details because I assume you've seen it. They talk about sacrifice and friendship and love and mortality. Data wants not to die, but to live knowing that he will die, to be mortal. Okay. Oh, wait, I forgot to talk about, I skipped over two very lovely scenes that were two of my favorite scenes. All out of chronology. Anyway, before Picard wakes up in the simulation with Data, there are two scenes. With Seven and Rios first. She brings him some booze she found somewhere. It doesn't seem to be green, but that's okay. And they talk about things that they swore they'd never do again, but did again. Rios letting a self-righteous Starfleet captain into his heart, and Seven killing someone because they deserved it, because they were bad. I'm glad to see Seven regretting her choice. Like I said, I don't consider Doris's death to be murder, because she was actively a threat to a whole bunch of people, including Seven. But this is clearly referring also back to Bjayzl, who Seven did kill, did murder. Well, she's clearly regretful about this. She doesn't talk about how every life is precious or anything like that, which this is a true sentiment. I believe that, but wouldn't sound quite right coming from Seven right now. And then when Rios talks about he cared about another Starfleet captain who died in front of him, and Seven says, could you have prevented it? He says, no. And she says, then I win. Which I thought was perfect, because that's comforting, pointing out that he couldn't have prevented it, but also not sappy, because Seven isn't sappy. So this scene was lovely. It's one of my favorite of the episode. I can't believe I almost forgot it. On a shallow note, it's two of the hottest people on this show. Seven and Rios. Anyway, and then we follow the little symbolic butterfly up to Raffi, sitting above the settlement, grieving on her own, and then Elnor comes up and starts just weeping, and she comforts him. She's very maternal with him, which is what he needs, and maybe probably what she needs too, considering her history with her son and everything. It's just, the scenes were lovely. But they were also the show was really committing to the idea that Picard was dead. Then the Picard Data conversation happens. It's lovely because it's coming full circle. The very first scene of this show was Picard dreaming about Data. So it's full circle. It's giving them the moment that Nemesis didn't. I don't want to talk about Nemesis too much, because it's not about that, and also I haven't seen it since it came out in 2002. So my memories are kind of fuzzy. But it gives them a scene between the two of them. That's satisfying, is I guess the best word for it. Data tells Picard that how he's been saved, how he's not dead, or, well, yes, he's dead, but that he's going to be resurrected, and asked to have his own consciousness, Data's, to be erased. He wants to die. He wants to live knowing, even briefly knowing, that he's mortal, because he thinks that's part of humanity, which is a lovely endpoint for Data, concerning his entire arc, all the way back to the very first episode, Encounter at Farpoint, was that he wants to be human. And he, even now, in his final death, he wants to experience humanity. So Picard says he will, and wakes up in the golem body. Here's another thing I was right about. I thought this was the most likely thing they would do, because they weren't going to kill off Picard, because we all knew all know there's going to be a second season. They weren't going to get rid of Patrick Stewart, so they weren't going to put him in a younger body. So they were going to make the synth body look exactly like Picard, exactly like Patrick Stewart. It's a little strange because they go to some lengths to say that this body is basically pretty much exactly like his old one, except that the brain abnormality is gone. He'll age. He doesn't have super strength or any normal android powers. He'll age, continue to age, and he'll probably die at the end of his natural lifespan. And Picard rather hilariously says, I wouldn't have minded an extra 10 years or 20. But anyway, there are implications to this whole thing that I think the show doesn't want us really to be thinking about right now, because I think they treat this like a one-off, like this is the one single golem body. And this mind transfer thing was a one-time deal. They act like that's the case, but I'm not sure why it would be. Surely if Dr. Soong could build one golem body, he could build more, but anyway, like I said, there are implications to this I don't think the show wants us to think about too much. So anyway, that's how they resurrected Picard, and I'm okay with it. Maybe a little bit because it means I was right. And then we see Data dying within the quantum simulation. I don't know what that means. I don't know anything about physics. But they use the word quantum, I guess, to signal that this is really Picard and really Data, because I think going down to the quantum level is how they say that the transporter doesn't kill you every time and makes a perfect copy every time you transport somewhere. I think that's how they say that you're still you. And so they're saying that Picard is still Picard, even if he's in a new synth body that's exactly like his old human body. Anyway, we see Data, we see Data lay down on the couch and die. You see a figure sit down next to him, so he's not alone. And of course, it's Picard. That makes the most sense. It's a simulation of Picard wearing the old red uniform. But my very first thought when I saw someone sit down next to Data was that it was Lal, because Lal has not been mentioned once this whole season, which is a little odd considering she was Data's first daughter. But anyway, that was my first thought before it was obviously Picard. And it was beautiful. It was quite beautiful. Blue Skies was playing. Sang, I believe, by Issa Briones, who I hope I'm saying her name right. Doing a lovely job. And it continues over this montage. Montage that ends the episode I'm going to talk about now. I both loved this montage, especially one part I'm going to talk about here in a second, and it also left me with a little bit with questions, a little bit of frustrations. First, we see Rios and Agnes are still a couple. We see Seven and Raffi are a couple now. They're sitting in the mess hall and they're holding hands, and I consider that canon confirmation. They are absolutely a couple, because they're not just holding hands like friends do. They're interlocking their fingers, and this is quite clearly signaling that these two are in a romantic relationship, which I was so happy to see, but also a little bit of issues. And then we have the montage goes on. Elnor is there. Soji and Picard are there, and the two of them talk about how they are going to travel. They want to travel. And then they all sit down and look at Picard, and he says, engage. The music swells, and they go boldly into the next adventure, which I really, really like. But also, I thought it was a wonderful thing to end the season on. But also, there are questions. First of all, I'm not sure when the time frame between this montage and the rest of the episode was. I hope it's a few weeks or even a few months, because otherwise there's a few things that don't make a lot of sense. They talk about the ban on the synths in the Federation being lifted, which is a good thing, of course. It should be lifted. But also, that's really fast. Does the Federation have an extremely fast-working government? Like, I hope, that's just one thing I hope this took some time. Otherwise, that is astonishingly fast and doesn't really make a lot of sense. That even if everyone, this is a measure that everyone in the government agrees with and says, okay, even so, there's got to be a process, you know? Anyway, and also, all right. Agnes. There's a lingering thing with Agnes. Okay, last we heard, the plan was, after they dealt with this, everything on the synth planet, was that she was going to turn herself in for murder. And clearly that's not happening. Clearly she's part of this crew now, and who are going to have their adventures. Now, I don't object to the fact of it, but they skipped a lot of things. I mean, you could make the argument that she doesn't need to go to jail. I personally have no need to see Agnes punished for this. I think she has redeemed herself. I think with all her actions, helping Picard, and I think the mitigating circumstances of the mind meld, which looked to me as being forced on her, had affected her mental state, so that she wasn't, even if it wasn't actual brainwashing, I don't think she was completely responsible for her actions. That argument can be made. You could easily use those reasons to say, well, this is why she's not in jail. Except the show doesn't bother. We're left to figure that out. And while I like that a show shouldn't have to spoon feed the audience every single thing, that's a lot to skip over. A lot to leave to the audience's imagination. The Rios-Agnes relationship is a little bit confusing. I like it. I thought there was clearly a vibe pretty much ever since they started to interact. I'm not sure why Rios is still so into her. I know they hooked up that once, but finding out that she was a murderer didn't seem to cause him any second thoughts. That seems a little odd. I'm just pointing that out. Elnor didn't really have a story, an Elnor story. He's a supporting player, that's okay. I like him a lot. Now, the big thing, Raffi and Seven. I am so happy to have this bisexual representation. Have to look up on the screen and see two bisexual women. Well, they seem to me to be bisexual. I don't know exactly how either would identify. That's how I read it, but others may read it differently, might be pansexual or even lesbian in Seven's case. This is my personal read. To see two bisexual women up there in a relationship is so wonderful to me. And Raffi and Seven, specifically these two characters, make a lot of sense together. They're the same age, they're similar but not identical in personality. They both have a lot of baggage, a lot of personal emotional damage to deal with. It makes sense to me that they would gravitate towards one another. But the show didn't really bother. Again, it makes sense that they would connect, but the show doesn't show them connecting. So that scene where, in the montage where they're holding hands, I believe is the first time the two of them on screen have interacted. I mean, clearly they have interacted off screen, but this is the first time we see the two of them together. So that bothers me a little bit. I hope next season, whenever it happens, I know the show was given a second season by CBS, but with the world situation as it is, who knows when they'll start filming it. I hope that relationship is explored a lot more and not just thrown in as part of a montage. Because it does seem as if Seven is going to be a regular. That's certainly the implication in that last scene, which for some reason is not something I ever thought would happen. It's awesome. But I never figured that would happen. It's not even like I thought, oh, they'll never do that. It's just it never occurred. The possibility never occurred to me. I hoped for a Fenris Ranger show with Seven as the lead. I hoped that maybe they would do a short trek about Seven, but it never occurred to me that they would just have her be a regular on the show, which seems very obvious, but somehow never occurred to me, so I'm very glad about that. They left some loose threads. I mentioned Narek. Now, like I said, I don't really care about Narek, but they did just forget about him. They don't mention anything about him, which, from a storytelling point of view, is kind of not the best, but also from my point of view, saying here, think about it, I don't care about Narek. Forget about him. O is still at large. She's gone back to Romulus. She has the potential to be a factor next season. And I think it's interesting. She was a fanatic, clearly, given everything she'd done, but it seemed like she was, it's hard to tell because she's very expressionless. She seemed to be genuinely affected by the fact that Soji chose not to be the destroyer. So who even knows what she'll do. The XBs are another thing. Have they been, we don't hear about them. Are they going to stay on the planet Coppelius with the synths? I can kind of see that. The XBs also another persecuted group that people don't trust, people consider dangerous. I could see how they could find a home on Coppelius. That makes sense, but again, the show never addresses it. This is Now this is a genuine nitpick. It's a tiny thing that doesn't really matter. The fleets they had show up, the Romulan fleet, 200 and however many, 18. Some were destroyed by the orchids. The orchids, I love the orchids. I didn't mention that. I love the orchids. They're gorgeous. That shot with the orchids going after the fleet and opening up, I thought that was beautiful. Anyway, the fleet of 200 some warbirds, and then Starfleet shows up, and they look like roughly the same. They certainly don't look outnumbered. Like, this is way too many ships. Like, one ship, one starship, and I assume one warbird can destroy a planet. This is massive overkill. And I'm like, apparently, for Starfleet, that attack on Mars at the Utopia Planitia shipyards apparently didn't slow down their ship production all that much. Because apparently they have so many ships, so many brand new top of the line advanced ships even, that they could send like a whole mess of them to one planet. I think it would make a little bit more sense to maybe for these two fleets to like be a dozen apiece. I think the show wanted that really cool visual of all those ships and didn't really think through the implications. It seems a little bit ridiculous. But anyway, that, like I said, that's a tiny nitpick that doesn't really matter. And I'm sure I'm not the kind of Trekkie that gets all excited about ships and ships design and different ship classes, but there are many who do, and I hope they have a lot of fun going through the frame. All the ships, the Starfleet ships anyway, look the same to me, but maybe there are people can differentiate. They don't ever say the class of the Zheng He. I can't pronounce anything. They don't ever say the new class of that ship, but I'm sure the ship experts in fandom will be all over that. Anyway, last thing I want to talk about is Picard's death. They foreshadowed heavily last episode and throughout the whole season, really, that Picard was going to die. And there is a tiny part of me, the writer part of my brain, that says that the fact that he died and then came back is just the tiniest bit of a cop-out. Now, I'm glad they, especially since there's definitely supposed to be a second season, maybe even a third, they had no choice but to keep Patrick Stewart and Picard around. You can't have Star Trek Picard without Picard. You can't have Picard without Patrick Stewart. So, and I think they did that. Came out of that corner as gracefully as possible. But like I said, there's a tiny little, to kill Picard off, I'm sure the fans would have rioted. And it's not like I want Picard to die. I love Picard. I want to see more of this show. But like I said, if they were going to commit to doing only one season, absolutely hard and fast, only one season, then I could understand. Then I think it would have been all right to kill him at the end of it, having redeemed himself, having saved Soji, have performed one last great heroic act. But that wasn't going to happen. So, like I said, I think this was handled as gracefully as possible, but there is the tiniest part of my brain that's saying that this is just a little bit of a cop-out. But I wonder too that Data's death, while being many things, maybe a kind of way to fix his death in Nemesis, to do it better, to have that closure with Picard, have that closure with the audience who loves Data, and then he dies for those reasons, but also as kind of a proxy, in a way, for Picard to show that, yes, death is real and permanent and not cheap. So that's kind of my thought there. I'm not opposed to killing off main characters. I think it should be done for a reason, or even important supporting characters like Hugh. One of my problems, I'll talk about this in the overview video, but one of the reasons I'm so unhappy about that, besides that I love Hugh, is that I think his death was mishandled. But yeah, that's a conversation for another video, and oh my goodness, I have talked for a long time. So there we have it. Those are my thoughts on the season finale. I thought it was really good. I'm really excited. I'm sad that the season is over. I hope you all are staying safe, staying home as much as possible. And things are scary right now, but I hope that we will come through this. And I think Star Trek is there for us to have, to give us hope, whatever form. Also, this book, it's actually Trek Book Club weekend, this weekend. If you're watching this as soon as I post it, go to @Trek Book Club on Twitter and you can talk about this book by Star Trek Picard, Last Best Hope, Una McCormack. It is really good. But even so, if you're watching this a week or a month or a year from now and you haven't read this book, you should. It's a great supplement to the season. It is also a fantastic book in and of itself. So really, Una McCormack is my favorite Trek author. I've never been disappointed in any of her books. They're really amazing. So do that and check out Trek Book Club. And stay safe as much as you can. And live long and prosper.